The year is 1814. Being signed is the Treaty of Ghent, a treaty concluding the War of 1812. Although it concludes the war, it remains a status quo as there are no territorial changes. Even so, the war had profound impact on American history. Currently, is being signed by John Quincy Adams from the United States and Lord Gambier from the United Kingdom, who had just gotten out of the Napoleonic Wars and was happy to end another war and enter peace.
I am America. These are our weapons. France, would you like to trade our weapons for your wine?
Oh, we would like to trade.
America, you shall not trade with bloody France.
The War of 1812 began obviously in 1812 and ended in 1814 with the signing of the Treaty of Ghent. And although it started in 1812, the cause of the war started as soon as the United States was born. The most direct cause of the war was British impressment of American soldiers and interference of American trade. The British were at war with Napoleon at the time and needed more sailors and money from America, which they still considered rightfully theirs. In fact, the War of 1812 is considered by Europeans to be part of the Napoleonic Wars, with the United States as a co-belligerent of France. But like all wars, there was more than just one main cause. Another major cause of the war was British support of the Native Americans living in the northwest frontier. The main reason why the U.S. invaded Canada was to stop support of the Indians, in which they succeeded, as the British cut off their support for them against the U.S. after the war.
Further still, the war was caused by a series of domestic events that took place leading up to the war. One huge reason tying into the British support of the Native Americans was the presence of British forts along the western frontier, which the British promised to leave but did not. The mentality of Britain towards America at the time was that they could retake the colonies anytime they wanted, but they were too busy with other things to actually do it, so they never left the forts built there during the French and Indian War. Another domestic cause of the war was the rise of the Indian leader Tecumseh, who called for Native Americans to unite against white Americans.
The Federalists were opposed to entering the war because if the United States took Canada, then many Canadian farmers would most likely join the Democratic Republican Party. Also, if they went to war with Britain, then trade, especially in the north, which is where most of the Federalists were, would be hurt. The Federalists also supported Britain because of British trade. In the latter stages of 1814, the Federalists held the Hartford Convention, but because word got out that they were having discussions of starting a new country, especially because it was during wartime, their reputation took a big hit, as this was seen as unpatriotic. As a result, this convention signaled the end of the Federalist Party.
What was the end result of the war? Nothing. The war was concluded at the Treaty of Ghent on December 24, 1814. The treaty stated that there would be no territorial changes between Britain and America, keeping the status quo before the war had started. And though the treaty was signed in late December of 1814, the word that the war had ended didn't get to America until early January of 1815, after the Battle of New Orleans had been fought. The Battle of New Orleans was fought from December 23, 1814 to January 8, 1815. Andrew Jackson was the general in charge of the American forces. He rose to fame after the battle because he had inflicted more than 2,000 casualties on the British and only lost 71 men himself. So if you lived back then, first you would hear about Andrew Jackson's huge victory. Then a few days later, you would hear that the war was over, so it's easy to understand how Jackson came to fame so quickly.
Hey, it's the Battle of New Orleans. That's Andrew Jackson over there. About to shoot him with a British rocket.
Dear sister, my husband left me yesterday morning to join General Winder. He inquired anxiously whether I had courage or firmness to remain in the President's house until his return on the morrow or succeeding day, and on my assurance that I had no fear but for him and the success of our army, he left me, beseeching me to take care of myself and of the cabinet papers, public and private. I have since recorded 2 dispatches from him, written with a pencil. The last is alarming because he desires I should be ready at a moment's warning to enter my carriage and leave the city, that the enemy seems stronger than had been reported, and that it might happen that they would reach the city, with intention to destroy it. I am accordingly ready. I have pressed as many cabinet papers into trunks as to fill 1 carriage. Our private property must be sacrificed, as it is impossible to procure wagons for its transportation. I am determined not to go myself until I see Mr. Madison safe, and he can accompany me, as I hear of much hostility towards him. Disaffection stalks around us. My friends and acquaintances are all gone, even Colonel C. with his 100 men who were stationed as a guard in the enclosure. French John, a faithful domestic, with his usual activity and resolution, offers to spike the cannon at the gate, and to lay a train of powder which would blow up the British, should they enter the house. To the last proposition I positively object, without being able, however, to make him understand why all advantages in war may not be taken.
The letter was written by Dolly Madison, the First Lady at the time. The letter was written to her sister after the burning of the White House, in which she was concerned for her own safety. The letter was written in Washington, D.C., in the White House, on August 24, 1814, near the end of the War of 1812. The White House was burned because of the burning of York, the capital of Upper Canada, so the British tried to get their revenge.
At the end of the war, what parts of the United States were occupied by the British? A. Detroit, Fort Niagara, and Fort Oswego. B. Fort Niagara, most of Maine, Lake Michigan area, including Wisconsin, and part of Georgia. C. Buffalo, Washington, part of Ohio and Vermont. Or D. None. The correct answer is B. Fort Niagara, most of Maine, Lake Michigan area, including Wisconsin, and part of Georgia. So, to wrap things up, the British interference with American trade and impressment of American sailors were the spark that triggered the war, but there were tensions leading to it in both domestic and foreign policies of the U.S. and Britain. And although the war only lasted for 2 years, and everything returned to the status quo afterwards, the war had a profound impact on American history because the war elevated America's status from a minor agricultural backwater to a powerful country with international influence. Also called the Second War of Independence, the war ensured that America would not relinquish its sovereignty to a tyrannical empire of tyranny. I'm Spencer Storey.
And I'm Walker Brown.
And thanks for watching.